The weight of the silver tray strained my wrists as I weaved through Milano's crowded dining room, the restaurant's dim lighting doing little to mask the exhaustion etched on my face. Friday nights were always chaos, a symphony of clinking glasses, hushed conversations about business deals I pretended not to hear, and the scent of truffle oil that clung to my black uniform long after my shift ended. 6 months of working double shifts had left dark circles under my eyes that even my carefully applied concealer couldn't hide. "Table 7 needs another bottle of the Brunello," Marco hissed as I passed the bar, not bothering to look up from the martini he was shaking. I nodded, though he wasn't watching. Nobody ever really saw me here. I was just another server gliding between tables, invisible until someone's glass emptied. That invisibility had become both my shield and my prison since David had disappeared, leaving me with mounting hospital bills for my 5-year-old daughter Lily's treatments and a debt I couldn't possibly repay. That's when I first noticed him. He hadn't been there when my shift started. The private corner booth, unofficially reserved though never explicitly marked as such, had been empty all evening until I turned from delivering an appetizer and found it suddenly occupied. 3 men in impeccably tailored suits sat in formation, 2 facing outward, scanning the room with practiced detachment, and him, settled in the center of the curved leather seat, his back to the wall. Even from across the room, something about him made my skin prickle. He couldn't have been older than 35, with sharp features softened only slightly by the shadow of a neatly trimmed beard. His dark hair was pushed back from his forehead, revealing eyes that seemed to absorb the restaurant's muted light rather than reflect it. Unlike the nervous energy radiating from the businessmen at my tables, he possessed a stillness that felt dangerous. Like the moment before lightning strikes, Marco appeared at my elbow, startling me. "Alessio's here," he whispered, a tremor in his voice I'd never heard before. "The owner wants you to serve his table tonight." Me? I blinked, confused. "Why not you or Gianna? The senior servers always handled the VIP tables." "Just do it, Emma." Marco's face tightened. "And for God's sake, don't mess anything up." I smoothed down my black apron, suddenly conscious of the coffee stain on my sleeve, and the way my ponytail had begun to unravel after hours on my feet. Approaching the table felt like walking into a different atmosphere. The air grew heavier with each step, charged with an energy I couldn't name. "Good evening, gentlemen." I was proud that my voice didn't waver. "Welcome to Milano's. May I bring you something to drink?" The 2 men facing outward barely acknowledged me, but he, Alessio, looked up, and the full weight of his attention hit me like a physical blow. His eyes weren't black as I'd first thought, but a deep brown so dark they appeared bottomless. They moved over my face with deliberate slowness, lingering on the loose strands of hair at my temple, before dropping to the name tag pinned to my shirt. "Emma!" My name in his mouth sounded different somehow, weightier. "Bring us a bottle of the Macedo, 2010. I knew enough about the wine list to recognize he'd just ordered a $1,200 bottle without glancing at the menu. I nodded, turning to leave when his voice stopped me. "You're new." It wasn't a question. 6 months, I answered, unsure why I felt compelled to correct him. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. 6 months, he repeated softly. "And yet we haven't met." A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of the crowded restaurant. There was no reason the owner of whatever business he ran would have crossed paths with a server, yet he spoke as though my existence without his knowledge was an oversight someone would answer for. "I usually work lunch shifts," I lied, not entirely sure why. "Excuse me while I get your wine." At the bar, my hands trembled slightly as I described the bottle to the sommelier. "Table 9, I said, and his eyebrows rose before he nodded and disappeared into the climate-controlled wine room. "Who is he?" I whispered to Gianna as she arranged desserts on a tray beside me. She glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. "Alessio Russo. He owns half the waterfront, legitimate businesses and otherwise. The restaurant's one of his." She paused, eyes darting around before adding, "People who cross him don't get second chances, Emma. Just serve the table and keep your head down." I'd heard whispers about the family that controlled much of the city's commerce and politics, but I'd dismissed them as exaggerations. Looking at Alessio now, Those stories suddenly seemed less like urban legends and more like warnings I should have heeded. The sommelier returned with the wine, but instead of handing it to me, he moved to take it to the table himself. I stepped forward quickly. "I've got it," I insisted, ignoring his surprised look. Though I couldn't explain why, I felt an irrational need to be the one to return to that table. As I approached with the burgundy bottle cradled in my hands, I noticed a man at table 4 watching Alessio intently. There was nothing particularly remarkable about him. Middle-aged, wearing a gray suit that hung slightly too loose on his frame, but something about the focused intensity of his gaze made my steps falter. He wasn't admiring or curious. He was monitoring. I set the wine on Alessio's table, presenting it label forward as I'd been trained. As he examined it with a casual glance, I caught the outline of a shoulder holster beneath his perfectly cut jacket when he shifted. My pulse quickened as reality crystallized. The warnings, the deference, the subtle current of fear that followed him through the room. This wasn't just some wealthy businessman. This was something far more dangerous. As I uncorked the bottle and began to pour, I noticed the man at table 4 discreetly lift his phone, angling it toward our corner, a camera. He was photographing Alessio. Without thinking, without considering the consequences, I set the wine bottle down and slipped my order pad from my apron pocket. My hand moved of its own accord, scrawling the words before my brain could catch up to warn me against what I was doing. "You're being watched. Table 4. When I leaned forward to pour Alessio's glass, I slid the folded note beneath his napkin, my fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm at the contact, and his eyes snapped to mine, narrowed with sudden interest. "Will there be anything else?" I asked, stepping back, my heart hammering against my ribs so violently I was certain he could see it through my shirt. "Not yet," he replied, his gaze never leaving my face. I nodded and retreated, feeling the weight of his stare on my back. What had I done? Why had I done it? I should have minded my business, kept my head down as Gianna advised. Instead, I'd inserted myself into something I couldn't begin to understand. I served my other tables on autopilot, hyper-aware of every movement in the restaurant. I watched from the corner of my eye as Alessio casually lifted his napkin, his expression never changing as he read my warning. One of his companions leaned in, receiving whispered instructions. The man stood, buttoning his jacket as he made his way toward the restrooms, passing directly behind table 4. 10 minutes later, the man at table 4 was gone, his half-finished meal abandoned. Alessio's expression remained impassive, but when I next approached his table, the atmosphere had shifted. His companion sat straighter, more alert, while he seemed more relaxed, swirling the ruby liquid in his glass with elegant fingers. "The check, please," he said when I cleared their barely touched entrees. I nodded, turning to leave when his hand caught my wrist. His touch was surprisingly warm, his grip firm but not painful. Still, I froze like a deer in headlights, my pulse racing beneath his fingers. "Thank you for the excellent service, Emma." His thumb brushed over my rapid pulse point, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll be seeing you again." It wasn't a question, or even a suggestion. It was a declaration, a promise that sent equal parts fear, and something far more confusing racing through my veins. I pulled my hand away with more force than necessary. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I managed, the professional mask slipping back into place as I escaped to the safety of the kitchen. When I returned with his check, he was gone, but an envelope sat on the table. Inside was $1,000 in crisp $100 bills, far more than the already exorbitant bill required. Scrawled across the leather check presenter in bold strokes was a phone number and 2 words: "Call me." I should have thrown it away. I should have given the money to Marco or the owner and forgotten the entire interaction. Instead, I slipped the envelope into my apron pocket, the weight of it burning against my hip for the remainder of my shift. It was past midnight when I finally left the restaurant, exhaustion dragging at my limbs. The night air bit through my thin jacket as I hurried toward the bus stop 3 blocks away, clutching my purse close to my side. The street was deserted, storefronts dark and shuttered. The sound of an engine purring to life made me jump. A sleek black car pulled away from the curb, rolling slowly alongside me as I walked. The passenger window slid down silently, revealing Alessio's unmistakable profile. "It's late," he said simply. "Get in." Fear and common sense screamed at me to run, but exhaustion and the memory of Lily's small body in the hospital bed anchored me to the spot. "I'm fine. Thank you," I replied, continuing to walk. The car kept pace. "That wasn't a request, Emma." I stopped, turning to face him fully. "I don't know you. You knew me well enough to warn me tonight." His eyes gleamed in the darkness of the car's interior. "Why did you do that?" The question hung between us, and I found I had no answer that made sense even to myself. "It seemed wrong," I finally said, "like an invasion of privacy." A smile curved his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost boyishly charming. The effect was disconcerting. "Privacy," he repeated, as though the concept amused him. "Get in the car, Emma. It's not safe for you to be alone. Because of you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. His smile widened. "Smart girl. Yes, because of me. Or rather, because of what you did for me. Actions have consequences. I prefer to ensure those consequences don't find you." The back door opened, revealing the interior of the luxury sedan. Everything inside me screamed that this was how women disappeared, how lives were derailed. And yet, hadn't my life already been derailed the moment David vanished with our savings, leaving me to care for our critically ill daughter alone? "I have a child," I blurted out, as though this fact might deter him, might make him realize I wasn't worth the trouble. Something darkened in his gaze. "I know," he said quietly. "Lily. 5 years old. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Currently in remission after her 3rd round of treatment at St. Vincent's Hospital." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you—" "Get in the car, Emma," he repeated, his voice gentler now. "Please." I found myself moving forward on numb legs, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of expensive cologne and something metallic that I refused to identify. As the door closed behind me with a soft thud, I realized I had just crossed a threshold from which there might be no return. "Take us to Ms. Richards's apartment," Alessio instructed the driver, who nodded without speaking. "How do you know where I live?" I whispered, pressing myself against the door, maintaining as much distance between us as the back seat allowed. He turned those fathomless eyes on me, studying me as one might examine a puzzle with missing pieces. "I make it my business to know everything about the people who interest me," he said simply. "And you, Emma Richards, have become very interesting indeed." The car moved silently through the empty streets, its tinted windows separating us from the outside world. I kept my eyes fixed on the passing streetlights, trying to calm my racing heart as questions tumbled through my mind. How did he know about Lily? What did he want from me? And why couldn't I bring myself to be properly terrified of the man beside me? "Your daughter's medical bills are paid through the next 6 months, Alessio said suddenly, his deep voice breaking the silence. "The hospital will not be contacting you about collections anymore." My head snapped toward him. "What are you talking about?" "I took care of it this evening." He spoke casually, as though he'd merely picked up a coffee for me rather than settled tens of thousands of dollars in debt. "Consider it a thank you for your discretion tonight." "I can't accept that," I said automatically, though the relief threatening to overwhelm me suggested otherwise. "I don't need charity." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "It's not charity, Emma. It's an exchange of favors. You did something for me, and I did something for you." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you know who that man was? The one watching me?" I shook my head. "Federal agent. They've been trying to build a case against my family for years." His tone was conversational, as though discussing the weather rather than federal investigations. "They're particularly interested in my movements right now. Had you not warned me, I might have discussed certain sensitive matters at that table." The casual way he admitted to being under federal investigation should have sent me scrambling for the door handle. Instead, I found myself asking, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand the value of what you did." His eyes held mine, and because I believe in transparency with those I choose to trust. "You don't even know me," I whispered. "I know enough." He shifted slightly, his shoulder now closer to mine. "I know you're drowning in medical debt because your ex-husband, David Keller, emptied your joint accounts and disappeared with his secretary to Cancun 6 months ago. I know you work double shifts at my restaurant and then pick up night shifts at the pharmacy on weekends. I know you sleep about 4 hours a night, and you've lost 8 pounds in the last month because you give Lily your portions when food runs low." Each word landed like a physical blow. The extent of his knowledge about my life was terrifying, not just because of the invasion of privacy, but because everything he said was true. "What do you want from me?" My voice trembled despite my efforts to sound strong. He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Initially, nothing." You caught my attention with that note, an unexpected act from an unexpected source. His lips curved into a slight smile. "Now that I've met you properly, I find I want to know more." The car slowed to a stop outside my apartment building, a crumbling brick structure with security bars on the first-floor windows and a front door that never fully closed. Shame burned through me as I imagined how it must look through his eyes. "I should go," I said, reaching for the door handle. His hand covered mine, stopping me. "Emma." Just my name, but it sounded like both a question and a command. I turned back to him, suddenly aware of how close we were in the confines of the back seat, how his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, filled my senses. "I'll have a car pick you up tomorrow after your shift," he said. It wasn't a request. "For what purpose?" I managed to ask. "Dinner." His thumb traced a small circle on the back of my hand, sending an involuntary shiver up my arm. I'd like to continue our conversation somewhere more comfortable. Every instinct screamed that getting further entangled with this man was dangerous. And yet, the memory of Lily's hospital bills, paid, taken care of, weakened my resolve. "I can't," I said finally. "I have Lily. My neighbor watches her during my shifts, but I can't ask for more." "Bring her," he replied without hesitation, surprising me. "I'd like to meet her." The thought of introducing my daughter to a man who casually discussed federal investigations made my stomach clench. "That's not a good idea." He released my hand, leaning back slightly. "You don't trust me with her. I don't know you," I repeated, my earlier words now carrying more weight. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Fair enough. Then allow me the opportunity to change that." He reached into his jacket and produced a slim business card. "My private number. When you're ready to talk about Lily's treatment, about your financial situation, about anything, call me." I took the card reluctantly, the heavy cardstock embossed with just his name and a phone number. No title, no company name. "Good night, Emma." He reached past me to open my door, his arm brushing against mine. "Sleep well knowing your daughter's medical care is secure, at least for now." I slipped out of the car, my legs unsteady beneath me. Before I could thank him, or perhaps come to my senses and return his money, the door closed and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, leaving me alone with his business card clutched in my trembling hand. Mrs. Patel was dozing on my couch when I entered the apartment, the television casting flickering blue light across her weathered face. She started awake at the sound of the door. "You're late," she observed, gathering her cardigan around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," I whispered, hanging up my coat. "How was Lily?" "Sleeping like an angel." Mrs. Patel's sharp eyes took in my appearance. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Beta. Everything okay at work?" I forced a smile. "Just tired. Thank you for staying late." After she left, I checked on Lily. Her small body curled around the stuffed elephant she'd had since infancy. Her breathing was steady, her cheeks flushed with healthy color rather than fever. Remission. The word had seemed like a miracle when the doctors first uttered it 3 weeks ago. I brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead, wondering what price I had unknowingly agreed to pay by accepting Alessio's favor. That night, I dreamed of dark eyes watching me from shadows and woke drenched in sweat, the business card still clutched in my hand. The next morning brought a courier to my door with a package containing a brand new phone, sleek, expensive, and programmed with a single contact. Alessio. A note accompanied it. "For your safety. Keep it with you." I should have been outraged at the presumption. But all I felt was a confusing mix of fear and something dangerously close to anticipation. 3 days passed in a strange limbo. I worked my shifts at Milano's, constantly aware of the private corner booth that remained conspicuously empty. The owner treated me with a new deference that made my coworkers curious and slightly resentful. The phone remained silent in my pocket, a constant reminder of the man who had inserted himself into my life with such casual authority. On the 4th day, I received a call from St. Vincent's Hospital. Expecting bad news about Lily's bills despite Alessio's assurance, I answered with trepidation. "Ms. Richards?" The voice was professional, pleasant. "This is Dr. Levine's office. I'm calling to confirm Lily's appointment with the specialist tomorrow." I frowned. "What specialist? We don't have an appointment scheduled." "Dr. Nakamura from Boston Children's Hospital," the receptionist clarified. "He's only in town for 2 days." It was arranged last week, a consultation regarding Lily's long-term treatment plan. "All expenses covered by your new insurance." My hand tightened around the phone. "I don't have new insurance." There was a pause. "According to our records, you were added to a premium private plan 3 days ago. The paperwork was processed through our billing department." Another pause. "The authorization came from the Russo Foundation." The world tilted slightly beneath my feet. "I see," I managed. "What time is the appointment?" After hanging up, I stared at the new phone in my hand. Before I could reconsider, I pulled up the single contact and pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Emma." My name and his voice still sent an involuntary shiver through me. "I was beginning to think you'd thrown the phone away." "What's the Russo Foundation?" I demanded, skipping any greeting. "A charitable organization that funds medical research and treatment." His tone revealed nothing, primarily focused on pediatric oncology. "And it just happened to arrange a consultation for my daughter with one of the top specialists in the country?" "Lily's case file was reviewed along with several others," he replied smoothly. "Her prognosis for long-term remission would improve significantly with some experimental treatments Dr. Nakamura is pioneering." "Stop it," I said, my voice shaking. "Stop pretending this is normal. You can't just insert yourself into our lives like this." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its polish. "Would you prefer I hadn't arranged the consultation?" The question deflated my anger because the answer was obvious. Of course I wanted Lily to see the specialist. Of course I wanted every possible advantage in her fight against the disease that had nearly taken her from me twice now. "No," I admitted quietly. "Then accept the help, Emma." His voice softened. "It doesn't have to come with strings." "Everything comes with strings," I countered. "Not this." He sounded almost earnest. "Consider it a gesture of goodwill." I closed my eyes, gathering my courage. Why me? Why us? The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he sighed, a surprisingly human sound from a man who seemed anything but. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night, after Lily's appointment," he said instead of answering. "I promise to explain everything then." Something told me this was as close to transparency as he was willing to offer over the phone. "All right," I agreed reluctantly, "but I need to be home by 9 for Lily." "I'll send a car at 7. He paused. "And Emma? Wear the dress that will be delivered this afternoon, for safety reasons." The line went dead before I could object, leaving me staring at the phone in confusion and growing apprehension. What kind of dinner required a specific dress for safety reasons? The package arrived at 4, a black garment bag delivered by the same silent courier. Inside was a burgundy cocktail dress with a modest neckline but an open back, along with shoes and a clutch that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Tucked into the pocket of the clutch was a handwritten note. "The restaurant we're going to has certain expectations. This will help you blend in. A." Lily's appointment the next day was both enlightening and terrifying. Dr. Nakamura was brilliant and kind, explaining treatment options I hadn't known existed. But with each nod, each note he made in Lily's file, I felt myself sinking deeper into Alessio's world, accepting his help, becoming indebted in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. "You're very lucky," Dr. Nakamura said as the appointment concluded. "These treatments are typically difficult to access due to cost and waiting lists. The Russo Foundation's involvement has expedited everything. He smiled warmly. Lily has an excellent chance now. Better than excellent. Relief and unease battled within me as I thanked him, holding Lily's small hand in mine. In the lobby, a nurse approached with a tablet. "Ms. Richards, if you could just sign these consent forms for Lily's enrollment in the treatment program," she asked cheerfully. "Everything is covered, of course." I scanned the documents, my suspicion growing as I noted the comprehensive nature of the care being offered. Not just the experimental treatments, but regular checkups, nutrition planning, even therapy sessions for both Lily and myself. "Who authorized all this?" I asked, pen hovering above the signature line. The nurse looked confused. "The Russo Foundation, as I understand it. They've become quite involved in pediatric cancer research recently." She lowered her voice. "Between us, they say Mr. Russo himself takes a personal interest in these cases. Lost a sibling to leukemia as a child, apparently." I signed the forms, wondering if that detail was true, or just another carefully constructed narrative. As we left the hospital, I noticed a black sedan idling at the curb, different from the one that had driven me home, but unmistakably sent by the same person. The driver nodded respectfully as he opened the door for us. "Ms. Richards, Mr. Russo asked me to take you and the little lady home to get settled before your evening appointment." Lily looked up at me with curiosity. "Who's Mr. Russo, Mommy?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain a man I barely understood myself. "A friend who's helping with your treatments," I said finally, guiding her into the car. "Is he a doctor?" she asked, climbing onto the leather seat and immediately discovering the hidden compartment containing juice boxes and cookies. "No, sweetheart. He's—" I trailed off, at a loss for words. "He's the man who paid for my special medicine?" she suggested, her perception startling me as it often did. Despite her young age, Lily had developed an acute awareness of our financial struggles, overhearing more than I realized about bills and treatment costs. "Something like that," I murmured, watching her small fingers carefully unwrap a cookie, wondering what I was walking into tonight. And more importantly, whether I would be able to walk away afterward. The day passed in a blur of nervous energy as I prepared for the evening. I curled my hair, applied makeup more carefully than I had in years, and slipped into the burgundy dress that fit as though it had been made for me. A thought that was both flattering and unsettling. How had he known my exact size? Mrs. Patel raised her eyebrows when she arrived to watch Lily, but asked no questions. My daughter, however, was less restrained. "You look like a princess, Mommy," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Are you going on a date?" "Just dinner with a friend," I replied, kissing her forehead. "Be good for Mrs. Patel. I'll be home before you go to sleep." At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. I expected the driver, but when I opened the door, Alessio himself stood in the hallway. The shabby surroundings only emphasizing his otherworldly elegance in a perfectly tailored black suit. He looked different somehow, perhaps because this was the first time I'd seen him in full light, or perhaps because something in his expression changed when his eyes moved over me in the dress he'd selected. "Emma," he said softly, the single word carrying a weight I couldn't decipher. "You look beautiful." Before I could respond, a small figure darted past me. Lily, curious about our visitor, positioned herself half behind me, peering up at Alessio with undisguised interest. "Are you Mr. Russo?" she asked boldly. "The one who paid for my special medicine?" I tensed, but Alessio's reaction surprised me. He crouched down to her eye level, his movements careful, as though approaching a wild creature he didn't want to startle. "I am," he confirmed, his voice gentler than I'd heard before. "And you must be Lily. Your mom has told me about you." She studied him with the solemn intensity only children can manage. "Thank you for helping me not be sick anymore." Something flickered across his face, a shadow of emotion so raw it took me aback. "You're very welcome," he replied, his voice slightly rougher. He reached into his jacket and produced a small box wrapped in silver paper. "I brought you something." And I opened my mouth to object, but Lily was already accepting the gift, her small fingers carefully unwrapping the paper to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny lily flower. "It's pretty," she breathed, holding it up to the light. "It's also special," Alessio told her seriously. "If you press the flower, it sends a signal to me. If you're ever scared or need help when your mom isn't around, you can press it. And I'll know." My blood ran cold at the implications, both the tracking technology and the suggestion that Lily might need such protection. Before I could object, he looked up at me, his eyes conveying a message I couldn't quite decode. "We should go," he said, straightening. "Our reservation is at 7:30. I nodded stiffly, turning to kiss Lily goodnight and whisper reassurances to Mrs. Patel. As the door closed behind us, I found my voice. "That bracelet is a precaution," he finished for me, guiding me toward the elevator with a light touch at the small of my back. "One I hope she never needs to use." "Why would she need it at all?" I demanded, stopping in the hallway. His eyes met mine, all traces of the gentle man who had spoken to my daughter gone, replaced by the dangerous stillness I'd first sensed at the restaurant. "Because the man you warned me about at Milano's wasn't just any federal agent, Emma. He was investigating a very specific case, one that has put both of us in a complicated position." "What are you talking about?" His jaw tightened. "I promised to explain everything over dinner, but right now we need to go. It isn't safe to have this conversation here." As we stepped into the elevator, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was descending into depths from which I might never fully resurface. The restaurant was unlike anywhere I'd ever been. A discreet establishment with no visible signage, located in the penthouse of a luxury high-rise downtown. The elevator required a key card that Alessio produced from his wallet, granting us access to the unmarked top floor. A suited man greeted him by name as we stepped into a space that seemed to float above the city, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a glittering panorama of lights below. "Mr. Russo," the maitre d' said with a deference that bordered on reverence. "Your usual table is ready." We were led to a secluded alcove, where a table draped in white linen awaited, a single red rose in a crystal vase at its center. The space was positioned to give us a breathtaking view while ensuring our conversation couldn't be overheard. Only after we were seated and wine had been poured did I realize there were no menus. "They'll prepare whatever you desire," Alessio explained, noting my confusion. "Just tell them what you're in the mood for." I swallowed, overwhelmed by the casual display of privilege. "I'll have whatever you're having." He smiled slightly, then addressed the hovering server. "We'll start with the scallop carpaccio, followed by the duck with cherry reduction, and bring another bottle of the Barolo." Once we were alone, the weight of unanswered questions pressed down on me. "You promised explanations," I reminded him, gripping my wine glass for stability. Alessio studied me for a long moment, as though deciding how much to reveal. "What do you know about your ex-husband's disappearance, Emma?" The question caught me off guard. "He left with his secretary, cleared our accounts and vanished. And before that? Did he ever mention his business associates?" A chill ran down my spine. "David worked in investment banking. He had clients, not associates." Alessio's expression softened with something that looked unsettlingly like pity. "David Keller was laundering money for the Vega cartel for at least 3 years before he disappeared. He was very good at it, until he wasn't." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That's not possible," I whispered, though even as I said it, fragments of memory surfaced. Unexplained late-night phone calls, weekends away for client meetings, cash I wasn't supposed to ask about. "The man at table 4 was Agent Robert Mercer," Alessio continued. "He's been tracking the Vega operation for years, and he believes, incorrectly, that I've taken over David's position in their organization." "Why would he think that?" I asked, struggling to process this reframing of my past. "Because approximately 3 months ago, someone using infrastructure similar to what David established began moving money for the Vegas again. Since my businesses occupy the same financial sector, and given certain family connections, I became a person of interest." His jaw tightened. "What Agent Mercer doesn't realize is that I've been actively working to dismantle the Vega operations in this city. They're dangerous, unpredictable, and bad for legitimate business." I took a large sip of wine, my hand trembling slightly. "What does any of this have to do with me? With Lily?" "Everything," he said quietly. "The last transaction David processed before disappearing was for $20 million. That money vanished along with him." His eyes held mine steadily. The Vegas believed someone helped him take it. The only person close enough to have been involved was you. The breath left my body in a rush. That's insane. I knew nothing about any of this. I believe you, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, but they don't. They've been watching you, waiting to see if you make contact with David or access the missing funds. Horror washed over me as the implications became clear. Lily has been under my protection since I discovered their interest in you 3 weeks ago, he assured me, his grip on my hand tightening. That's why I arranged for you to serve my table at Milano's. I needed to meet you, to assess whether you were involved. A faint smile touched his lips. I didn't expect you to warn me about a federal agent. The first course arrived, exquisite scallops arranged like flower petals, but I couldn't imagine eating now. If what you're saying is true, we should go to the police. And tell them what? That your ex-husband, who has disappeared without a trace, was laundering money for a cartel that would happily kill you both for even speaking their name. He shook his head. The feds already suspect you're involved, Emma. Walking into a police station would only accelerate their timeline for bringing charges. This can't be happening, I whispered, pulling my hand away to press it against my forehead. I understand this is overwhelming, Alessio said, his voice gentling. But there's more you need to know. The Vegas aren't just watching you. They've placed someone close to you. My thoughts immediately went to Mrs. Patel, who had moved into the building shortly after David left. Who? Dr. Collins at St. Vincent's. He's been reporting on Lily's condition and your movements. I felt physically ill. Lily's primary oncologist, the man I had trusted with my daughter's life, was working for the people who wanted to hurt us? Why are you helping us? I asked, the question that had lingered since he'd first approached me. What do you get out of this? Alessio's expression changed, something fierce flickering behind his eyes. The Vegas killed my sister when I was 12. Crossfire in a territory dispute. His voice remained controlled, but I could hear the banked rage beneath it. I've spent 20 years building the resources and connections to ensure they can never threaten another family. Your situation presented an opportunity to accelerate my timeline. We're bait, I realized, stomach sinking. No, he corrected sharply. You're under my protection, which means you're untouchable in this city. The Vegas know that now. What they don't know is that I've been using their interest in you to track their operations. Every person they've assigned to watch you has led me back to another piece of their network, including Dr. Collins, I said, the betrayal still stinging, who has been feeding them misinformation about Lily's treatment schedule for weeks, at my instruction. His lips curved in a cold smile. He was quite cooperative once he understood the alternatives. The casual mention of coercion should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a disturbing relief, knowing that someone with Alessio's resources and apparent lack of ethical boundaries was on our side. The appointment today with Dr. Nakamura, I said slowly. That was real? Completely. Lily deserves the best care available, regardless of these other complications. His expression softened again. The bracelet I gave her contains a GPS tracker and panic button. My security team monitors it continuously. She's never unprotected, Emma. The food before us remained untouched as I processed everything. What happens now? You continue your normal routine, he said. Go to work, take care of Lily, live your life. The only difference is that you'll now be aware of the eyes on you, and you'll have me. He hesitated. If you want my help. Something in his phrasing made me look at him more closely. Despite his power, his apparent control over the situation, there was uncertainty in his eyes, as though my answer genuinely mattered to him. Do I have a choice? I asked quietly. Everyone has choices, Emma. Yours are complicated by circumstance, but they remain yours. He leaned forward slightly. I can arrange for you and Lily to disappear tonight. New identities, new location, enough money to start over. You'd never see me again. The offer stunned me. It was exactly what I should want, safety for Lily, away from this dangerous world I'd unwittingly entered. Yet the thought of never seeing Alessio again created an unexpected hollow feeling in my chest. Or, I prompted, or you stay, under my protection, with my resources at your disposal. Lily continues her treatment with Dr. Nakamura. You keep your job at Milano's, though perhaps with more reasonable hours. His eyes held mine. and we see where this connection between us leads." "What connection?" I whispered, though I had felt it since that first moment in the restaurant when his eyes met mine. Instead of answering, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with surprising tenderness. "You warned a known criminal about federal surveillance, Emma. You got into my car when any sensible person would have run. You're here now, despite knowing what I am." His touch lingered at my jaw. "Don't pretend you don't feel it too." The honesty disarmed me. I did feel something. A pull toward this dangerous man that defied all logic. Was it gratitude for his help with Lily? Fear disguised as attraction? Or something genuine that had sparked between two unlikely souls? "I need time," I said finally. "This is a lot to process." He nodded, withdrawing his hand. "Of course, but there's one more thing you should know." His expression grew serious. "The Vegas have become impatient. They've set a deadline for recovering their money. Money that David took, not you. If it isn't found within 2 weeks, they'll assume you've hidden it and act accordingly." Fear clutched at my throat. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," he said carefully, "that regardless of what you decide about our personal connection, you and Lily need my protection now more than ever." As I looked into his eyes, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. One path leading to an uncertain escape, the other deeper into Alessio's world with all its dangers and unexpected possibilities. What frightened me most wasn't the choice itself, but how drawn I felt to the second path, despite everything logic told me. "I need to get home to Lily," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Can you take me back now?" He nodded, signaling for the check without touching his food. As we rode the elevator down in silence, his hand found mine, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that should have been presumptuous, but somehow wasn't. "Whatever you decide," he said softly as the doors opened. "Remember that you're not alone anymore, Emma." The following days passed in a strange haze of normalcy, layered over newfound vigilance. I returned to work at Milano's, now acutely aware of the eyes that followed me. Not just Alessio's security team, whom he'd pointed out to me as we left the restaurant that night, but others, a man who lingered too long at the bus stop each morning, a woman who frequently appeared in Lily's favorite park, always with a different child. I began to see the invisible web that had surrounded us for months without my knowledge. Alessio maintained a respectful distance, though his presence remained constant. A different luxury car waited each evening to drive us home. Fresh groceries appeared at our door twice weekly. The apartment building's security system was quietly upgraded, and a new doorman, one with the unmistakable vigilance of someone with military training, took up residence in the lobby. We spoke daily, brief conversations that grew longer as my initial shock faded. He never pressured me for an answer to his proposition, but the unspoken question hung between us during each call: stay or go, trust him or flee. On the 5th night after our dinner, I returned home to find Mrs. Patel asleep on the couch and Lily's bed empty. Panic seized me until I noticed the balcony door slightly ajar. I rushed outside to find my daughter sitting with her small legs dangling between the railings, the silver bracelet gleaming on her wrist as she chatted animatedly with someone on a cell phone. "Lily!" I gasped. "Where did you get that phone? Who are you talking to?" She looked up, her face brightening. "It's Mr. Russo, Mommy. He called my special bracelet." I took the phone from her hand, my heart racing. "Alessio?" "Emma." His voice was calm. Lily pressed the panic button. My team confirmed there was no immediate threat, but I called to make sure she was all right. "I was practicing," Lily explained earnestly. "In case of emergencies." I carried her inside, settling her back in bed before returning to the balcony to continue the conversation in private. "I'm sorry she bothered you." "She never bothers me," he replied, surprising me with the warmth in his tone. "She's remarkably bright for her age. She told me you answered right away," I said, leaning against the railing, city lights glimmering below. "Do you personally monitor her tracker?" There was a pause. "I receive alerts directly, yes." The admission touched me more deeply than the expensive gifts or paid medical bills. This powerful, dangerous man had arranged his life to be personally available if my daughter needed help. "Thank you," I said softly, "for everything you're doing for us, Emma." My name in his voice still sent that same shiver down my spine. Have you made a decision? The question I'd been avoiding. I'm still thinking. Time is running short, he reminded me gently. The Vegas deadline is 9 days away. I closed my eyes, the weight of the choice pressing down on me. I know. I need to be sure I'm making the right decision for Lily. And for yourself, he added. Lily comes first, I said automatically. Of course. But your happiness matters too. There was a rustling sound, as though he was moving. I have to go. There's a situation that requires my attention. We'll talk tomorrow. After he hung up, I remained on the balcony, gazing at the city sprawled before me. Somewhere out there, people were searching for money I didn't have, plotting against a daughter who had already fought harder for her life than anyone should have to. And somewhere else, a man I barely knew but increasingly trusted was working to keep us safe. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. When I opened it, Agent Mercer, the man from Table 4, stood in the hallway, flanked by 2 other agents. Emma Richards? He asked, though his expression made it clear he knew exactly who I was. We'd like to ask you some questions about your connection to Alessio Russo. My heart stuttered in my chest. I work at his restaurant, I said cautiously. I don't really know him. Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. The 3-hour dinner at Vincenzo's last week suggests otherwise. He held up a manila folder, as does the car service, the paid medical bills, and the regular phone calls. I felt the blood drain from my face. I need to call someone to watch my daughter before I go anywhere. Your daughter can stay with Mrs. Patel, he said, nodding toward my elderly neighbor's door. This won't take long. Just a friendly conversation at our field office. There was nothing friendly about the steel in his voice, or the way the other agents positioned themselves to block any potential escape route. I knew calling Alessio would only confirm their suspicions, yet my fingers itched for the phone he'd given me. Let me get my purse, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. As I stepped back into the apartment, I pressed Lily's bracelet twice in quick succession. The signal Alessio had taught her for serious emergencies. I could only hope he would understand. The federal building downtown was imposing, all glass and steel with security checkpoints that made me increasingly nervous. Agent Mercer led me to a small interview room with no windows, just a metal table and 3 chairs. No formal charges, he assured me. Just some questions. The interrogation lasted for hours. They knew about David's connections to the Vega cartel, about the missing money, about every detail of my financial struggles after he left. They showed me surveillance photos of Alessio entering my building, of us leaving the restaurant together, of the cars that picked me up after work. We know Russo has taken over your husband's operation, Mercer insisted, and we believe you're helping him, perhaps under duress. This is your chance to cooperate, Ms. Richards. We can protect you and your daughter. I don't know anything about any operation, I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. David left me with nothing, Mr. Russo has been kind enough to help with my daughter's medical bills, that's all. Kind. Mercer repeated skeptically. Alessio Russo doesn't do kindness without expectation, Ms. Richards. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's promised, you need to understand who you're dealing with. His family has been linked to organized crime for generations. Are you charging me with something? I asked finally, exhaustion settling into my bones. Mercer sighed, closing his folder. Not today. But we'll be watching, Ms. Richards. When you decide you're ready to tell the truth about Russo's operation, call me. He slid a business card across the table. For your daughter's sake, I hope it's soon. It was nearly dark when I emerged from the federal building, disoriented and frightened. I had no phone, no money for a cab, and no idea if Lily was safe. As I stood on the steps, weighing my options, a familiar black car pulled to the curb. The back door opened, and relief flooded through me at the sight of Alessio. Get in, he said quietly. Quickly. I practically fell into the seat beside him, the door closing behind me as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Lily is safe at my home with my sister-in-law, Sophia, he assured me, taking my hand. His thumb traced circles on my palm, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. Mrs. Patel called the emergency number I gave her when the agents took you. They know everything, I whispered. About us, about David, about the money. Not everything, he corrected. They suspect, but they don't know. His eyes searched my face. Did you tell them anything? There was nothing to tell, I replied honestly. I don't know anything about David's work or the missing money. Something in Alessio's expression shifted. But you didn't tell them that I'm working against the Vegas, not with them. I didn't tell them anything about you at all, I said. I didn't trust them. He relaxed slightly, his hand squeezing mine. Good. That buys us time. I looked out the window, noticing unfamiliar streets. Where are we going? I need to get home to Lily. We're going to my home, he said. It isn't safe for you to return to your apartment right now. The agents will be watching it, and so will the Vegas. Panic flared in my chest. I need to see Lily. And you will, he promised. She's waiting for you. But Emma, he hesitated. This changes our timeline. The Vegas will view your questioning as a risk. They'll assume you might have revealed something about their operation. What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means they won't wait 2 more weeks, he said grimly. They'll move against you much sooner, possibly within days. The car turned through wrought iron gates onto a tree-lined drive, approaching a sprawling estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. Security cameras swept the perimeter, and I glimpsed men with the unmistakable vigilance of trained guards positioned discreetly throughout the grounds. Welcome to my home, Alessio said as the car stopped before grand double doors. You and Lily will be safe here until this is resolved. The home's interior was a stark contrast to its fortress-like exterior. Warm woods, plush furniture, artwork that transformed hallways into galleries. Alessio led me through the main floor to a sunlit room where Lily sat at a table with a dark-haired woman, both bent over a board game. Mommy! Lily launched herself at me, and I caught her in a fierce hug, breathing in her familiar scent. Sophia's teaching me chess, and I got to swim in the indoor pool, and there's a whole room just for movies. I looked over her head at the woman, Sophia, who smiled warmly. She's been an absolute delight, she assured me. Alessio, why don't you show Emma to her room so she can freshen up before dinner? We'll finish our game. As we climbed the curved staircase, Alessio's hand at the small of my back, the weight of the day's events finally hit me. I stumbled slightly, and he steadied me with a gentle grip. I know this is overwhelming, he said quietly. That's an understatement, I replied, following him down a hallway lined with what appeared to be genuine Renaissance paintings. How long do you expect us to stay here? He stopped outside a door, turning to face me. That depends on how quickly we can resolve the situation with the Vegas. And how do you plan to do that? His expression turned grave. I have people looking for David and the money. If we find either, we can negotiate. And if you don't? I asked, afraid of the answer. His silence told me everything. This is your room, he said instead of answering, opening the door to reveal a suite larger than my entire apartment. Lily's is connected through that door. Everything you need should be here. But if not, just ask. I stepped into the room, overwhelmed by its elegance and the surreal turn my life had taken. Alessio, I said, turning back to him. What happens now? He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. That depends on your decision, Emma. Are you staying or do you want to disappear? The question hung between us, weighted with implications beyond the immediate danger. Was I willing to tie my fate, and Lily's, to this complex, dangerous man who had inserted himself into our lives with such calculated precision? Or should I take his offer to vanish, to start fresh somewhere far away, standing in this fortress of a home, with Lily happily playing chess downstairs, protected and cared for in ways I could never manage alone? I realized my decision had already been made. Perhaps it had been made the moment I slipped that note beneath his napkin at Milano's. We'll stay, I said quietly. For now. Relief flashed across his face before his composed mask returned. Good. Get some rest. We'll talk more at dinner. He turned to leave, then paused. Emma, thank you for trusting me. As he closed the door behind him, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life, or finally finding a path to safety for Lily and myself. Only time would tell. Block 5. 3 days passed in the gilded safety of Alessio's estate. Lily thrived in the environment, exploring the grounds with boundless energy, her health visibly improving under the combination of Dr. Nakamura's treatments and regular meals prepared by Alessio's private chef. I watched her transformation with a mixture of gratitude and unease, knowing this borrowed paradise couldn't last forever. Alessio maintained a respectful distance, joining us for meals, but otherwise occupied with what he cryptically referred to as arrangements. Sophia became a constant companion, her warm presence easing the strangeness of our situation. I learned she was married to Alessio's older brother Marco, who was currently overseas managing family business interests. "He's always been the protector," Sophia confided one afternoon as we watched Lily playing in the garden below Alessio's study window. "Even as a child after Ariana died." "His sister," I said, recalling our conversation at Vincenzo's. She nodded. "It broke something in him, not in a way most people would notice. Alessio has always been controlled, precise. But those who know him saw the change. He built his entire empire on the foundation of that loss. He told me he's working against the Vega cartel because of what happened to her." Sophia's eyes softened. "That's part of it. But bringing down the Vegas is just one piece of a larger mission. He wants to create a world where families like his, like yours, don't have to live in fear." "That by controlling the fear himself," I observed, watching as Alessio emerged from the house to speak with one of his security team. "We all make compromises with our ideals," Sophia replied, following my gaze. "Alessio chose power as his means to protect what matters to him." She turned to me, her expression serious. "And now that includes you and Lily." The words hung in the air between us, confirming what I'd begun to suspect. Alessio's interest had evolved beyond strategic advantage or casual attraction. I'd seen it in the way his eyes followed Lily as she chattered about her day at dinner, in the books that appeared in our rooms selected specifically to our tastes. In the brief moments, his careful composure slipped to reveal something raw and earnest beneath. That evening, as Lily slept peacefully in her connecting room, a soft knock drew me to my door. Alessio stood in the hallway, his usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, a tension in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. "May I come in?" he asked. "There have been developments." I stepped aside, and he entered, pacing to the window before turning back to me. "We found David." My heart lurched. "Where?" "Argentina, living under the name Michael Brennan with the secretary, Jessica, and most of the Vegas money." His jaw tightened. "He's been there the entire time, while you struggled to pay for Lily's treatments." A strange numbness washed over me. After months of questions, of grief and anger and confusion, the simple confirmation that David had indeed abandoned us felt anticlimactic. "Is he alive?" "For now." Something dangerous flashed in Alessio's eyes. "My people are bringing him back. To face charges? To face the Vegas," he corrected. "It's the only way to ensure your safety. They want their money, but more importantly, they want to make an example of whoever stole from them." Horror crept through my numbness. "You're going to hand him over to them? They'll kill him." "That would be the traditional resolution," he acknowledged, his voice carefully neutral. "And you're okay with that?" I stepped closer, searching his face. "Using my ex-husband as a sacrifice to save us?" His expression hardened. "The man abandoned his critically ill daughter and left you to face the consequences of his actions, Emma. His life means nothing to me compared to yours and Lily's." The cold practicality of it stunned me. This was the side of Alessio I'd glimpsed at Milano's. The dangerous stillness, the capacity for ruthlessness. Yet I couldn't deny the truth in his words. David had made his choices, betraying not just me, but our daughter. "There has to be another way," I said finally. Alessio studied me for a long moment. "Perhaps there is. The Vegas primarily want their money and to save face. David recovered most of it when my team found him, but approximately $5 million is still missing." $5 million, I repeated, the sum incomprehensible. "I can cover the difference," he said matter-of-factly. "Offer the Vegas their full $20 million plus interest as a gesture of goodwill. David would still face consequences, but perhaps not fatal ones." I sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. Why would you do that? He moved closer, crouching before me so our eyes were level. I think you know why, Emma. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. There was no artifice in his expression now. No careful mask of control, just raw, unexpected vulnerability from a man who likely showed it to very few. This isn't normal, I whispered. We barely know each other. I disagree. His voice was soft but certain. I've seen you at your most vulnerable, making impossible choices to protect Lily. You've seen past my reputation to recognize my intentions. We may not have years of history, but we have something equally valuable. Clarity about who we truly are. His hand found mine, warm and solid. I'm not asking for promises, Emma. I'm asking for a chance to see if what I feel, what I believe we both feel, can grow into something real, something worthy of building a future around. Before I could respond, a sharp knock interrupted. One of Alessio's security team stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Sir, we have a situation. Agent Mercer is at the gate with a warrant. Alessio rose in one fluid motion, his demeanor instantly shifting back to calculated control. For? The arrest of David Keller, sir. They're claiming he entered the country illegally an hour ago and was transported to this location. Understanding dawned on me. You knew they were tracking your people, I said, looking up at Alessio. You wanted them to follow David here. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Federal custody is preferable to what the Vegas had planned for him. This way, David faces justice through legal channels. The Vegas get their money without bloodshed. And most importantly, you and Lily are finally free of this shadow. Mr. Russo, the security guard pressed. They're threatening to force entry. Let them in, Alessio instructed. Have Sophia take Lily to the East Wing. Emma and I will meet Agent Mercer in the main hall. As the guard departed, Alessio turned back to me. I never intended to hand David over to the Vegas, Emma. That's not the man I want to be, especially not in your eyes. Relief washed through me, followed by a rush of emotion I couldn't quite name. Without thinking, I reached up and pulled him down to me, our lips meeting in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with months of tension and unacknowledged attraction. His hands framed my face with surprising tenderness, and for a moment, the world beyond this room ceased to exist. When we finally broke apart, his eyes had darkened with something that made my pulse quicken. We should go downstairs, I whispered against his lips. We'll continue this conversation later, he promised, the words carrying a weight that sent anticipation curling through me. Downstairs, Agent Mercer waited in the grand foyer with 4 other agents. His eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of us descending the stairs together, Alessio's hand at the small of my back. Mr. Russo, he acknowledged coldly before turning to me. Ms. Richards, I see you've made your choice. Where's David? I asked, ignoring his implication. Being processed as we speak, we intercepted him at the airport after receiving an anonymous tip about his arrival. Mercer's gaze shifted to Alessio. Very convenient timing. Alessio merely shrugged. I'm as surprised as you are, Agent Mercer. Though I'm glad to hear Ms. Richards' ex-husband has been located. Perhaps now she and her daughter can have some closure. And the $20 million that disappeared with him? Recovered by the Argentinian authorities, I believe. Alessio replied smoothly, though I understand there may be a shortfall. Perhaps in his statement Mr. Keller will reveal where the rest is hidden. Mercer's eyes narrowed. We still have questions about your involvement, Russo. My involvement was limited to providing security for Ms. Richards and her daughter after learning they were under threat from the Vega cartel due to her ex-husband's activities. Alessio's tone was measured, reasonable. I believe you'll find all evidence points to David Keller acting alone in his dealings with the Vegas. A tense silence followed as Mercer weighed his options. Finally, he nodded curtly. We'll need formal statements from both of you tomorrow. In the meantime, Ms. Richards, you and your daughter are free to go. They'll be staying here until we're certain the threat from the Vegas has been neutralized, Alessio countered. I'm sure you understand my concern for their safety, Agent. After Mercer and his team departed, the massive front doors closing behind them, Alessio turned to me with a hint of his earlier vulnerability returning. Are you all right? I think so, I said, surprised to find it was true. What happens now? David will face federal charges for money laundering and tax evasion. My legal team will ensure your name is completely cleared. His hand found mine. As for the Vegas, I've already arranged the transfer of funds to settle David's debt. With the federal investigation now public, they'll be eager to close this chapter quietly. And us? I asked softly. What happens with us now? He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent warmth spiraling through me. That's entirely up to you, Emma. As I said, I'm not asking for promises, just possibilities. 6 months later, those possibilities had crystallized into a new reality I could never have imagined on that fateful night at Milano's. Lily and I had moved into a sun-filled apartment in Alessio's building downtown, close enough for convenient visits but maintaining our independence while our relationship developed. Her health continued to improve under Dr. Nakamura's care, the treatments proving more effective than anyone had dared hope. David had accepted a plea deal, his testimony helping dismantle significant portions of the Vega cartel's operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He would serve 15 years, long enough for Lily to grow up without his destructive influence, but with the possibility of someday making her own decisions about a relationship with her father. As for Alessio and me, we were building something neither of us had expected to find. Behind the dangerous facade he presented to the world, I discovered a man of surprising gentleness and unwavering loyalty. He was teaching me to trust again, showing Lily what it meant to have someone who would never disappear when things became difficult. There were complications, of course. Dating a man with Alessio's reputation and responsibilities brought its own challenges. But each time I watched him patiently teaching Lily chess in the garden, or felt his arms wrap around me in the quiet moments before dawn, I knew I had made the right choice that night. "Any regrets?" he asked one evening, as we stood on our balcony overlooking the city where our unlikely story had begun. I turned in his embrace, studying the face that had become so dear to me. "About slipping that note under your drink?" "Never." His smile, the real one, not the calculated charm he showed the world, lit his eyes as he pulled me closer. "Neither do I, Emma. Neither do I." In the apartment behind us, Lily slept peacefully, her silver bracelet still on her wrist, though she hadn't needed to use its emergency function since that first night. The world outside still held dangers, and Alessio's path would never be entirely free of shadows. But we had found safety in the most unexpected place, with each other, and created a family stronger than the circumstances that had brought us together. As his lips found mine beneath the stars, I realized some warnings lead not to danger, but to salvation. And sometimes, the most dangerous choice can become the only one worth making.